She whispered it right against my ear, so quietly that no one else at the rehearsal dinner even noticed she'd leaned in at all. 6 words. "You're marrying the wrong person, Nathan." Then she straightened up, smiled at my fiancé across the room like nothing had happened, and walked out into the garden lights before I could even turn around and ask her what she meant. I stood there holding a champagne flute I didn't remember picking up, staring at the door she'd just disappeared through, while 40 of our closest friends and family laughed and clinked glasses 20 feet away, completely unaware that the ground under me had just tilted. My fiancée, Claire, caught my eye from across the tent and smiled that soft, easy smile she always gave me, and I smiled back on instinct. The kind of smile you give when your face knows what to do, even if the rest of you has gone somewhere else entirely. The woman who'd said it was named Sophie. 3 years ago, she was the person I thought I was going to marry. To understand why 6 whispered words could undo a man 22 hours before his wedding, you have to understand what Sophie and I were before we were nothing at all. We met in a graduate program neither of us finished the way we planned. She was blunt in a way I found terrifying and then irresistible, the kind of person who told you exactly what she thought about your work, your ideas, your questionable haircut, and somehow made you want more of her opinion instead of less. We fell into each other fast and hard, the way you do at 24 when you still believe love is supposed to feel like falling instead of building. For 2 years, we were the couple our friends rolled their eyes at, always touching, always finishing each other's sentences, always certain. Then she got the offer. A research fellowship in Copenhagen, 2 years. The kind of opportunity you don't get twice in a career like hers. I remember the night she told me, sitting on the floor of her apartment with the offer letter between us like a small, terrible animal neither of us wanted to touch. I told her she should take it. I meant it as love. She heard it as permission to let us go. And maybe, if I'm honest with myself now, some coward's part of me meant it that way too, because long distance terrified me more than losing her did, and I didn't have the courage to admit that out loud. She left 3 weeks later. We tried the calls and the time zones for about 4 months before the silences between us got longer than the conversations. And then one Tuesday she simply didn't call, and I didn't either. And that was how a 2-year relationship ended. Not with a fight, but with 2 people quietly agreeing to stop trying without ever saying so. I met Claire 14 months after that, at a mutual friend's barbecue, and she was everything Sophie wasn't in the ways I told myself I wanted. Steady, calm. She made plans and kept them. She didn't set my nervous system on fire, but she made me feel like I could finally breathe normally after 2 years of loving someone who felt like a beautiful, exhausting storm. We dated for 2 years, moved in together, got a dog, built a life that looked, from every reasonable angle, like exactly what a grown man should want. I proposed on a Tuesday, which she liked, because Claire likes things to be deliberate instead of dramatic. I hadn't spoken to Sophie in almost 3 years. I didn't know she was even back in the country, let alone in this city, let alone standing at my rehearsal dinner in a green dress, until she was walking straight toward our table with a wine glass in her hand, like she had every right to be there. Later, I'd learned the accident of it. She was renting a house 2 doors down from the venue owner, had been invited to the dinner as a courtesy +1 by an old mutual friend who had no idea about our history, and had accepted before realizing whose rehearsal it actually was. By the time she recognized my name on the seating chart, she told me, it felt ruder to leave than to stay. I don't fully believe that's the whole truth, and I'm not sure she does either. But it's the story she told me, and I let her tell it. For the rest of that dinner, I was a ghost sitting at my own table. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh. I toasted when I was supposed to toast. But underneath all of it, her 6 words kept looping through my head on a track I couldn't turn off. And every time I looked at Claire, I felt this strange, guilty static, like I was cheating on the moment itself just by thinking about someone else in it. My best man Theo caught it before Claire did. He always does. Halfway through dessert, he leaned over and asked, low enough that no one else could hear, if I was all right. And I told him I was fine, just nervous, and he gave me the look he's been giving me since college, the one that says he knows I'm lying and is choosing. For now, to let me have it, I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Claire in the hotel room we weren't supposed to share until after the wedding, technically breaking a tradition neither of us actually believed in, and I listened to her breathing slow into sleep while I stared at the ceiling and turned Sophie's sentence over and over like a stone I couldn't put down. Wrong person. Not wrong choice, not wrong timing. Wrong person. There's a version of that sentence that's just an ex-girlfriend being cruel or wistful or drunk on nostalgia and champagne. And there's a version that's true. I didn't know which one I was lying awake with, and that not knowing was its own kind of quiet violence. Around 4 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went down to the hotel bar, which was technically closed, but the night bartender let me sit anyway because I told him I was getting married in about 30 hours, and he took pity on me the way people do for men who look like they're unraveling in formal wear. I ordered a coffee instead of a drink, because some small responsible part of me knew I needed my head clear, not foggier. Sophie found me there, or maybe I should say I wasn't surprised when she did, which tells you something about what I was really doing sitting in an empty hotel bar at 4 a.m, instead of sleeping beside the woman I was about to marry. She sat 2 stools down, not next to me, like she'd thought carefully about the distance beforehand. She didn't apologize right away. She just said quietly that she shouldn't have whispered what she did, that it wasn't fair, that she'd had too much wine and too much history in the same room, and it had made her reckless. I asked her what she meant by it anyway. I told her I deserved that much, even if she'd been wrong to say it in the first place. She was quiet for a long moment, turning her water glass slowly on the bar, and when she finally spoke, her voice had lost all its earlier edge. "I watched you all night," she said. "At the dinner. You laughed at the right times. You said the right things. But you looked at her the way people look at a beautiful painting they respect, not the way you used to look at me, like the room was on fire and I was the only exit. I'm not saying that because I want you back, Nathan. I have someone. I'm saying it because I know what it looks like when you love someone, and I didn't see it tonight. And I couldn't sit there and say nothing. I told her, more sharply than I meant to, that comparing the way I looked at Claire to the way I looked at a 24-year-old fantasy of us wasn't fair, that real love at 31 doesn't look like a burning room. It looks like someone choosing you on the boring Tuesdays, too. Maybe, she said. Or maybe you've just gotten so good at choosing the safe thing that you've convinced yourself safe is the same as right. That sentence hit somewhere I didn't have armor for. I didn't say anything back. Neither did she. We just sat there in the fluorescent hush of an empty hotel bar. 2 people who used to know each other's whole bodies now unable to look directly at each other's faces. And for a long time the only sound was the ice machine cycling somewhere behind the counter. I want to tell you I had some clean cinematic realization right there. I didn't. I went back upstairs more confused than when I'd left, and I lay back down next to Claire, and I watched her sleep. And instead of the storm Sophie's words were supposed to stir up, I felt something else entirely, something quieter and harder to name. I noticed the small crease between Claire's eyebrows even in sleep, the one she gets when she's been carrying something all day and hasn't put it down yet. I noticed I knew that crease. I knew what caused it most days. Her mother, her job, some unspoken worry about whether I was actually all right that she was too kind to push on. I realized lying there at 5 a.m. that I hadn't actually looked at Claire all week. Not really. I'd been so tangled up in my own nerves, and then in Sophie's ghost, that I'd stopped seeing the actual woman lying 3 inches away from me, the one who'd spent the last 2 years choosing me on every ordinary day that never made it into anyone's love story. The wedding was that evening. I had maybe 12 hours to figure out whether Sophie had handed me the truth or just an old wound dressed up as one. I found Claire in the morning in the little sunroom off our suite, already dressed for hair and makeup, sitting with a cup of tea she wasn't drinking, staring out at the garden where the chairs were already being set up in white rows. She looked up when I came in, and something in my face must have given me away, because the first thing she said wasn't good morning, it was, "You've been somewhere else since last night." Where'd you go? I could have lied. Part of me wanted to. The same coward's part that let Sophie walk onto a plane to Copenhagen 3 years ago without a fight. But I sat down across from her instead, and I told her everything. The whisper, the bar, the sentence about the burning room and the boring Tuesdays. I watched her face while I said it, bracing for it to close off the way I'd seen it do before when she was hurt. But instead she just listened, quiet and steady, the way she listens to everything, like she was giving my words room to finish before she decided what to do with them. When I was done, She didn't say anything for a long moment. The garden crew outside kept unfolding chairs, oblivious, the metal legs clicking against the stone. "Do you think she's right?" Claire finally asked. And her voice didn't shake, which somehow made it worse and better at the same time. I told her the truth because I owed her that more than I owed her a smooth morning. I said I didn't know if Sophie was right about the marrying part, but I knew she was right about one thing, that I'd spent the last week so scared of doing this wrong that I'd stopped actually being present in it, stopped looking at Claire, and started just performing the version of a groom I thought I was supposed to be. I told her I didn't want to marry a performance of us. I wanted to marry the real, unglamorous, boring Tuesday version. The one where she saves me the last good coffee, and I know exactly what her worry crease means, but I needed her to know I'd almost let fear talk me out of trusting that version was enough. Claire was quiet for what felt like an unbearably long time. Then she reached across the small table and took my hand, and she said the thing I didn't know I needed to hear. "I don't need you to look at me like the room's on fire," she said. "I've watched people love like that. It burns out. I need you to look at me like I'm still going to be standing here in 40 years, tired and unglamorous and completely yours, and mean it." "Do you mean it?" I told her I did, and for the first time all week, saying it didn't feel like a line from a speech I'd rehearsed. It felt like the truest sentence I'd said in days. We didn't cancel anything. We didn't run off into some grand gesture. We just sat in that sunroom a little longer, holding hands, watching the chairs fill up outside, and something between us settled into place that hadn't been settled in a long time. Not because Sophie was wrong, but because she'd accidentally forced us to stop coasting and actually choose each other on purpose, wide awake, with our eyes open. I saw Sophie one more time briefly near the edge of the property as guests were arriving that evening. She was leaving, a bag over her shoulder, clearly not planning to stay for the ceremony. She caught my eye across the lawn and gave me a small, sad, honest smile, the kind that doesn't ask for anything back. "You look like you found your answer," she said when I walked over. I told her I had, and that some of it was because of what she'd said, even if she hadn't meant it as a gift. "I didn't say it to break anything," she said. "I said it because I once let someone I loved get on a plane without fighting for them. And I promised myself I'd never watch that happen to someone else without saying something, even if it wasn't my place." I told her I understood now, and I thanked her, and I meant it in a way that surprised both of us. She nodded, adjusted the bag on her shoulder, and walked toward the parking lot without looking back. And I let her go the way I should have let her go 3 years earlier, with something like peace instead of guilt. Claire and I got married an hour later under string lights and a sky just beginning to turn violet at the edges. When I said my vows, I didn't recite the version I'd practiced in the mirror all week. I told her about the crease between her eyebrows and the boring Tuesdays, and the fact that I'd spent one terrifying night 4 days ago wondering if safety and love were the same thing, and had come out the other side certain that with her, they always had been. If you've ever had someone from your past hand you a hard truth wrapped in the worst possible timing, you know exactly what that night cost me and exactly what it gave me back. Some people show up in your life just long enough to make you look directly at the thing you've been avoiding, and then they leave, not as villains, not as saviors, just as messengers who did their strange, uninvited job. Claire and I have been married 2 years now. Some nights, when the house is quiet and she's fallen asleep before me, I still think about that hotel bar, the ice machine, the sentence that nearly knocked the ground out from under me. But mostly I think about the sunroom and her hand in mine, and the question she asked me that I'll spend the rest of my life answering the same way every single ordinary morning on purpose, wide awake. We got a postcard from Copenhagen about 8 months after the wedding. No return address, just a photograph of a harbor at dusk and 4 words on the back in handwriting I still recognized instantly. "Glad you stayed awake." Claire found it in the mailbox before I did, and instead of asking who it was from, she just smiled, propped it against the kitchen window where the morning light hits it, and left it there. It's still there now, a little sun-faded, and neither of us has ever taken it down because it doesn't feel like a wound anymore. It feels like a marker of the night. We almost lost each other to a fear neither of us had said out loud, and the morning we decided, deliberately, not to. I think about Theo sometimes, too. The way he watched me all through that rehearsal dinner without saying a word. trusting me to find my own way back to myself before the vows started. He told me once, years later, half joking over drinks, that he'd had a speech ready in his pocket in case I bolted. Something about how real love doesn't need a burning building to prove it's real. It just needs someone willing to stay in the boring, ordinary rooms with you. I told him he should have given that speech to me that morning, instead of Claire. He laughed and said some lessons only land when the right person says them, at the right hour in the right sunroom. And he was probably right about that too. Some mornings, usually the ordinary ones, the ones with cold coffee and unmade beds and nothing dramatic happening at all, I catch myself looking at Claire across the kitchen the exact way I used to worry I couldn't anymore. Steady, certain, wide awake. And every time it happens, I think about a whispered sentence at a rehearsal dinner that was supposed to end something, and somehow instead